Good evening. It's a little odd. I'm going live on a Saturday evening, but definitely wanted to bring some information to everyone. So hopefully if you're unable to watch, you can watch this on the playback. So happy Saturday. Happy first day of May. Summer is quickly approaching. I am Miriam Lacroix. I am an immigration attorney and founder of Lacroix Law PC. If you are unfamiliar with myself or my law firm, at Lacroix Law PC, we give our clients peace of mind while helping them navigate their path to legal status. And how do we do this? We do this by doing marriage-based green cards and other family-based green cards, naturalization, citizenship, and by helping immigrant victims and survivors of domestic violence obtain legal status. And so today, we'll be discussing President Biden's first 100 days in office. As we know, the first 100 days doesn't actually tell us everything that a president is going to accomplish within their term, but presidents have been evaluated for their performance in the first 100 days for many, many years, right? For many administrations. And so the first 100 days is pretty important, right? And it's important to talk about what the president has done within that time, especially for things that are important to you. And one of the things that are important to me, or that is important to me, of course, because I work in immigration and my clients are immigrants, is what President Biden has done for immigrants in these last 100 days. And that was one of his big promises, right? He's made a lot of promises about implementing changes within our immigration system, both to reverse those harmful changes that the Trump administration created, but also to reform and update a system that is so broken and is still very broken. I think there's still a lot of work to be done. So I will, of course, just be talking about some of the positive changes that have been happening so that we can stay positive. But there's a lot of work to be done. So I just want you to keep that in the back of your mind. So for those of you who are watching, if you have questions as I go through what's been happening in these first 100 days as it pertains to immigration, definitely drop me a comment. Be happy to answer those for you. So let's get started. What are some of the changes that have happened? The first 100 days, I think the end of the 100 days was yesterday. And so I've sort of been jotting down some things that I have seen change. And I'm not going to be talking about everything that's changed in immigration because I am not familiar with every part of immigration. There's a lot that has changed with employment-based and business immigration and things like that. I primarily do humanitarian and family-based immigration. So I'm going to talk about the things that affect my clients. And hopefully they're helpful to you if it's something that has affected you or your family or anyone that you know, okay? So one of the first thing I'm going to talk about is the travel ban. That's one of the things that changed under the Biden administration. If you remember, the Trump administration's infamous Muslim ban that banned people from majority Muslim countries. It was amended a few times. There were some countries added, but Biden, on his first day, had an executive order, and he announced that he was ending that, right? There's no travel ban for people from Muslim countries, or what we call the Muslim ban. So that was a good thing, right? And I think part of what President Biden wants to do is to prevent previous presidents from banning certain people based on things like religion and race and things like that, right? I think that's pretty important, and I think it might be a little difficult, but I think that is a good thing that he wants to end things like that, because the Muslim ban should have never happened, right? Immigrant visa, the Immigrant Visa Proclamation, yes, that was a big one. So I think right at the beginning of COVID, the previous administration decided that they were going to completely stop legal immigration into the United States for certain categories of immigrants, right? And they were sort of leaving, I think it was spouses and children. They were allowed to immigrate into the United States, but they were definitely just pausing legal immigration into the United States. And that was a proclamation that started probably back in March or April of last year. And so Biden has decided to end the suspension on travel. So that is no longer a thing, that proclamation. And I don't think he ended the proclamation that suspended the work visa portion, but that has since expired, right? So now, if your consulate is open, it depends on the consulate and what types of applications they're prioritizing, but there is no pause or limit on who can immigrate into the United States, okay? Let's see, what is next? So, the public charge rule. So that was a big thing. This is something that I talked about at length since it was expanded. And I'll correct myself because there's always been a public charge rule. But under the Trump administration, it was expanded. And so it made it a lot harder for people of certain from certain places and certain backgrounds to obtain their green card, right? Because the expanded public charge rule required people to meet all of these sort of, like you had to, if you spoke English, it was sort of an extra check for you. If you had an education, if you had resources and things like that. So it became really difficult for people who didn't have resources, who came from non-English speaking countries and didn't have resources to have higher education to learn English. And that was a really big blow for a lot of the people I work with. And so under the Biden administration, this is something that he did promise, is he chose to withdraw the government's appeal, the injunctions blocking the public charge rule. So basically what happened when the Trump administration expanded that rule, there was an injunction or a stop on that rule. But then the Trump administration appealed to the Supreme Court, appealed that stop to the Supreme Court. And while that appeal was pending, the public charge rule was back in place. And so what this administration decided to do was to withdraw the previous administration's appeal. And what ended up happening is that the expanded public charge rule was no longer in effect, and the previous regular public charge rule was in effect. So what does that mean? That means that you still have to have a sponsor in order to enter the United States, right? If this is, for example, a marriage-based green card process, your spouse is still your sponsor. Your spouse still has to prove that they make above the poverty line, and that they can support you and who else they are responsible for, right? But all those extended rules in determining whether or not the applicant themselves can financially support or sustain themselves is no longer in effect. So that's also a very good thing that happened in these first 100 days. I know other immigration attorneys are extremely happy as well, because there was an additional form and a lot more evidence that needed to be submitted. So we and our clients are very happy that that is no longer in effect. Some other changes in these first 100 days. TPS. TPS is temporary protected status. And normally the president or the executive decides to designate certain countries for temporary protected status based on, war or natural disaster or something happening in a country. So for example, Haiti is one of the countries that designated for TPS after the earthquake. And so the Trump administration really attempted to end these protections for thousands of people. And if you remember, for countries like Haiti, El Salvador, I believe Nepal, a few countries, TPS was coming to an end. And people were really worried because the Trump administration was not going to extend that designation. And what would happen is that all of those people would be asked to leave, right? And that causes a whole other issue, because if you're here on TPS since 2009, 2010, this is where you build a life, right? And if you don't know anyone in your home country, if you don't know where to go, if you're the person sending money home to your family that's in that home country, that's going to cause a dip in your country's economy. And it's likely going to cause a dip in our own economy here as well, because of course, those who are here on TPS or temporary protected status have work authorization. And so they're working and they're buying houses and they're sending their kids to school. And so that was a really big deal. But under the Biden administration, he's put an end to that, right? So he's not only extended TPS for countries like Haiti and El Salvador and a few other places, but he's also designated new countries for TPS, one being Venezuela. And I think if you are from Venezuela and looking for a way to at least regularize your status to get work authorization at the very least, TPS will allow you to do that. I'm trying to be reminded of the requirements just in case anyone is eligible for Venezuelan TPS. So you have up until September 5th to apply, right? So it's a 18-month, I believe, designation. So yes, you have up until September 5th to apply. You have to prove that you've been continuously residing in the US since March 8th, 2021. You have to prove that you've been continuously present also in the US since March 9th, 2021. And you would have to complete the TPS application prior to September, mail it in with the required fee and photo, passport photos and things like that. And you could be given work authorization if you are from Venezuela. Okay, so yes, TPS is one of the great things that happened in the first 100 days in immigration under Biden. And let's look for some other stuff. So the big stuff that I would say is not set in stone yet, but it's underway. And I want to make that very clear because I think there are some unscrupulous attorneys and non-attorneys probably taking money from people talking about the Citizenship Act and Biden's, new plans for immigrants. Be very wary and make sure you know exactly what's in effect and what's not in effect, right? Venezuelan TPS is in effect, and that's something you can apply for right now, right? But we talk about this roadmap to citizenship for undocumented individuals in the US, right? Almost like an amnesty. So first, one thing that this administration promised was a pathway to citizenship for dreamers, right? Those who have deferred action for childhood arrivals, DACA. There are hundreds of thousands, I believe, of people living in the US under DACA. And DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, for those that don't know, was created through executive order through President Obama in 2012 for people living in the United States who entered as children, right, through no fault of their own. They were brought here by their parents, right? And so they're now here going to school. They may have been here for 20 years and had, and they didn't bring themselves here. And so he created DACA for them. They get work authorization, a social security card. And since then, people have been able to work and go to school and live a pretty normal life in the US without fear of deportation until Trump happened, right? And he tried to end DACA, which was a whole mess. But DACA was saved, thank God. But also now Biden is trying to expand that. right? And so he wants a pathway pathway of citizenship or to citizenship for those who have DACA. And then those who I talked about with TPS, temporary protected status, he's also looking into having a pathway to citizenship for TPS holders as well. They're in similar status as DACA recipients as well. But one of the big things is the Citizenship Act. And that expands beyond DACA, beyond TPS, right? And it's a bill that would allow undocumented individuals who are living in the United States right now to apply for something called temporary legal status. So it would be 5 years of this temporary status that they would have, and they'd be safe against deportation as long as they, pass all these criminal and national security background checks. And of course, they're going to want to make sure you're paying your taxes, you're not committing any crimes, you're like you've been living under the radar, but you've been doing everything and you've been on the up and up, right? Those are the type of people they're going to be looking for. And so this new bill creates a pathway to a green card for undocumented people living in the United States. And so once you apply for the temporary legal status and you have that for 5 years, then you can apply for your green card, which is pretty cool, right? And then after, I think it's 3 years after having your green card, you can then apply for citizenship if you pass the citizenship exam that is required of everyone who applies to naturalize in the United States. So in addition to Dreamers, those who have TPS, people who are just undocumented and have no status at all would have a pathway to a green card through this new citizenship bill. It also includes immigrant farm workers. If they are here and they're immigrant farm workers and they meet the requirements, they will be eligible for green card immediately. So those are the really big things that were in the bill. And the House actually passed the immigration bill for the Dreamers and the farm workers. And we're still actually waiting for it to be passed in the Senate. But, we're in the right direction. So that's a good thing. So let's see, do I have anything else? Some of the other smaller things that I noticed have changed have to do with students. So I think there was some guidance. I think when COVID had begun, students who were here in the US on a student visa were experiencing some trouble because school was starting to go virtual. And part of the visa, you have to be attending classes. And the Trump administration did not want to allow people to attend classes virtually and still keep their student visa. But recently, remote learning has been permitted so that people can keep their student visas and work and go to school. I'm sorry, to keep their student visas and go to school remotely. So that was also a good thing. So recap of the things, some of the things, there's definitely way more than what I'm talking about today. But some of the things that have been changed or the positive things that have happened under the Biden administration for immigrants in his first 100 days includes the revocation of that travel or Muslim ban, right? No more bans for people who were on the countries who are on the list for the Muslim ban. The proclamation ending or pausing legal immigration into the United States if you fell under certain categories, that's also ended. There's no more pause there. The public charge rule or the expanded public charge rule is no more. We don't have to worry about it. We're just gonna move forward as if it was prior to the Trump administration. TPS redesignation for the countries who already had TPS, and then new designations for TPS for Venezuela, and I think also Myanmar. So there are two that I know of. And then the U.S. Citizenship Act and the Dream and Promise Act that really gives a pathway to a green card and pathway to citizenship for DACA recipients, TPS recipients. Also, I think I didn't mention DED or Deferred Enforced Departure recipients, and those who are living in the U.S. undocumented. And so we're sort of halfway there. There's an uphill battle in the Senate for these bills to completely pass, but I think we're headed in the right direction, of course, which is always promising. And so there's, like I said earlier on, when I first started the live, there's a whole lot of work to do. I feel like the immigration system needs to be completely overhauled and reformed, right? So many of my clients have been waiting for years to hear from immigration about their case, right? People who are applying for citizenship shouldn't be waiting 6 and 8 months to hear back and get a date to take the test and become citizens, right? Those applications should not be taking that long. Marriage-based applications are taking 1.5 years for my clients who are married to US citizens. They've already started their life. They've already started having children. Yes, they have work authorization, but they're in limbo. They don't have a green card. And a lot of employers don't understand the difference between a green card and work authorization. And so they're in limbo and they're waiting for their green card for way too long. I think that there are some changes, there needs to be changes in terms of, the sentiment that immigration, USCIS, the immigration courts, ICE has about immigrants. I think that it's amazing that this administration changed our immigration laws from calling undocumented individuals aliens and switching that up, and I think now it's been changed to undocumented individuals and not aliens, because that's just really outdated, and I don't know anyone that refers to themselves as an alien. So it's nice that our system now changes it. So I definitely feel a more positive outlook on immigrants rather than the very negative blaming outlook that our country had on immigrants for the past 4 years. So I definitely think that the changes are good, but there's still so much to be said about that, even outside of immigration. I'm only going to talk about immigration because that is what my lives are about. Let's talk immigration, but there's a lot that has to be done in this country as a whole under the Biden administration, and there's some things that he's missing. So I'll stay on just for a couple more seconds if anyone has any questions about what I talked about today. I'm so grateful for everyone who tuned in to listen. I hope this was helpful to you, and that you got some good information from it. I'm going to try to do this on a weekly basis again. I usually have been live for I usually go live every Wednesday, but I find that a lot of people aren't available, so I decided to do it today. So thank you all for watching. And for those of you who are watching it on the replay, type in #replay so I can see you all then. Have a good evening.